Jody here with the Oz Arab Media team. Today we have something special for you once again. This is a safe space for the women that we know and love and support in our community. Seek no permission. Love, heart, determination, and passion. This is their platform. Welcome to her empire. Proudly sponsored and supported by the Oz Arab Media team. Today, I'm thrilled to have Sarah Ibrahim in the studio today. Sarah's the principal of Central Lawyers here in Sydney. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Sarah, so your skill set reaches far beyond just litigation. How does that help with you and your future and the future of those communities that you're involved in?
Well, I actually think that litigation should always be the last resort in relation to any issues that arise for businesses. So I actually spent a long time more as a transactional lawyer, which is preparing contracts for people, thinking about terms and conditions and things like service agreements, because I actually want people to avoid getting into litigation. A lot of solicitors have a bad rap because once you're in litigation, it's a bit of a nightmare trying to end a dispute or have a fight in court. So expensive. So if I want businesses to thrive, I actually try to ensure they don't actually litigate at all. So I spend most of the time preparing businesses that are either buying and selling with all the appropriate contracts they need to buy or sell a business.
Yep. Setting them up from the beginning
right.
to have that success prior to needing the opportunity to go, oh no, now we don't have it. How do we get out of it?
Yes, or things like you anticipate when you're buying a business and you think about things like, well, if there is going to be a dispute, how do we want to resolve it from the beginning? Yeah. But things like, well, when you make a profit or when you start to think about where distribution should go, or if someone needs to leave the business, how do you get them to exit in an appropriate way? Or with your clients or customers, you start to think about, well, how do we set out really clearly what's expected for them so that we don't have an argument about all of the intricate details that we would have expected. So it's a lot of the things I do is manage people's expectations, but in writing for clients. So that actually makes their transition and their ability to grow a business much smoother. Because you can think about the times that you've been in business and you can think about where little things come up and you think, God, I wish that we had just had that made clear. Absolutely. So that we don't need to have an argument about it.
That's right. How are we here now?
Exactly.
Why was that not pointed out? Why were those expectations not managed from the get-go, and then we wouldn't need to be where we are today?
Right. But there are exceptions. So Central Lawyers is a commercial practice. It's a boutique commercial firm that helps businesses as they are setting up and as they're scaling and getting bigger, and unfortunately when they do get in disputes. But I have made some exceptions because, for example, I had filed proceedings against the ABC for Antoinette Lattouf. And I did that because there was a real time limit. So this wasn't about how to negotiate a favourable outcome at that point. Once you're in that
we're here now.
We're here now. And although, so how do we protect someone's interest when something is so urgent and so egregious? So at the time I was filing for her, it was literally like, I think the 22nd of December, and we were away with my family, I think at a hotel somewhere at the Gold Coast or something, when things were blowing up. Instead of me, just, swimming by the pool, I'm in the room going, oh my goodness, how is this all happening? So every now and then you've kind of got to change courses and be really agile and do what you need to do. But that also leads into why I did that for Antoinette, leads into the same principles as to why I started a community legal service, thinking about equality for all.
Yeah, and I think that's now what I want to delve into is, why did you do that? What is your favourite part about being in litigation and helping those communities and that sustainability? What's the favourite part?
But I should say it's not a favourite thing for me to be in litigation because it's conflict, and like most humans, I don't relish in being in conflict. I actually want to get to a resolution as quick as possible. But sometimes, depending on who the players are, you have no other choice but to fight, essentially. And you just get yourself ready. And the best armor is knowing the law and getting prepared to have arguments in this context with an umpire, which is the judge. But in terms of why I started a community legal service thinking about kind of equality for all, I mean, I guess in the legal sector, it was very obvious to me, and I'll give you an example, is that we have little community legal services that think about advancing the rights of people with disabilities because we have a disability rights.
Yeah.
We have an elder law rights centre.
Okay.
We have a women's rights centre, a youth rights centre. We have a intellectual disability rights centre. We even have in the city we have the LGBTIQ plus community legal service called the Inner City, and we have a HIV rights centre. So one of the things I was able to identify by being a lawyer for so long is that Australia was behaving as if we all were experiencing racial equality, and we were not. No. So there was a gap. And to be honest, there's no more obvious time right now where there's a dehumanisation of people particularly from the region I am, from the Middle East.
Yeah.
And I think that's before anything had happened, that was just my observation. So we incorporated the Racial Justice Centre in 2022. Yep. So that was well before anything had happened in that region. But I guess it was always about thinking about what I knew about communities, including First Nations communities, what I knew about many different ethnic minority groups, including the one, where I'm from in terms of the Arab community, and other communities that kind of either were not being seen or were being too visible, and that meant were being treated equally.
That's so true, Sarah. I think now, what about what got you to where you are today? What are some of those crunch moments, some of those deciphering moments that you actually went, you know what? This is where I need to be. This is where I can add some difference. This is where I can truly contribute to the world and the way we operate as we know it today.
In terms of my own personal journey, probably like most people maybe even listening, I grew up in Western Sydney. Initially I went to primary school at the local public school, and then I went to a Catholic high school in the area in Western Sydney. And at a really young age, I always knew I was going to be a lawyer. I don't know why, but I just knew that's what I wanted to do.
Was that your parents going, oh, you argue about everything, you're going to be a lawyer?
There was a bit of that from... Actually, I think at least a couple of kids at school would say that you should just be a lawyer. Yeah. So that was already embedded in my mind. But in terms of my parents, my parents just wanted me to do well, like all ethnic parents, go to university, study hard. There was always that underlying pressure. But I know, like my husband now, when I talk to him, he didn't have that kind of pressure. So it was definitely like inbuilt in my ethnic community because I grew up I'm Egyptian, and I grew up in the Egyptian Coptic community, and that was kind of expected of everyone. They had to study really hard. And I guess when you're a minority, you always think that education is a pathway towards a level of economic freedom of some sort. Yeah. So I guess, but it probably was kids in primary school kind of saying, oh, you should just be a lawyer. And me thinking, I think I can be a lawyer. And I see that in my little daughter now, one of the youngest ones. She can argue better than I can. And I'm thinking she definitely should be a barrister one day.
I love that about our little woman.
Exactly.
Let's lead by example and show them, darling, you can do anything.
Oh, yeah. She likes to pick up on a level of hypocrisy that I demonstrate at different points when I tell her she needs to clean the room every Friday to do movie night. She's like, have you seen your room? You haven't even spent enough time cleaning it before you tell me to clean mine.
They hold us so accountable.
Yeah,
it's like, hang on a second, who's the parent?
That's right. So that's why I'm thinking, if you're going to be able to construct a really good argument, she's got a bright future. Andrew, my husband, always says, she should be a CEO for sure of something. But I think she should be a little barrister at some point. But I do think that is a lifestyle decision that maybe she won't want to make, because I don't necessarily think that there's a good work-life balance. But to talk about that journey, my own journey, was then from there I then decided I was actually better at economics. Like, I was naturally gifted at understanding, because economics is about how all these different systems are intertwined and work together to create, I guess, economies or systems. Yeah. And I was really good at piecing those pieces together. And Mrs. White, my teacher, she just used to, I was like the best in the class at economics. So she used to spend extra time with me and mentor me, and I did really well at economics. So I thought, I should be an economist, really. But it wasn't a direct career path like just being a lawyer. So inevitably I studied economics and law. But economics at university was so much more mathematical than it was at school. And
as opposed to just being real and life and working it
exactly.
out. It was all about the numbers.
Yeah, and the thing about the law, and people don't talk about this enough, is the law, along with, say, how economic systems work, the things I liked about it is a lot of it is still storytelling. Like, the law is about how sometimes two companies or two people, a lot of the stories arrive in terms of what we call precedents, because of the story of how people couldn't come to a resolution. So it's all about a story, really.
It's so true. And I think when you think of law, you get bogged down in, I guess, the black or white notion of law, and that's not what it is. It's still a story.
It's a story about,
a coming of time.
Well, how somebody decided to get into an agreement with someone. This is what they thought about what the agreement was, but actually this is what it was. Or it could be about
not knowing what it was.
Right.
Going back to those expectations again that you said.
Exactly. Or it could be about, in employment space, well, this is also the expectation we had of you and you've fallen short, or, So everything is about, I guess, the storytelling that happens on the individual level. So I guess there is a connection for me and a passion for me in understanding and people's stories and advocating for them. But I got into economics and law, but then I went off and did a lot of, I guess, human rights law, until I decided to pivot into doing a lot more commercial law. So once I became in-house counsel, I actually didn't realise how much I was actually going to enjoy that pursuit. And so once I started doing that, I was like, I actually really like businesses, because there's something about businesses that's liberating. Individuals, and you might know as someone who runs a business, it's a path to freedom.
It really is. It's your path. It's not a preconceived path. It's what's happening today, seeing the opportunity in things and going, okay, let's go with it. And who knows where it's going to take us.
Exactly.
That's probably also what I'd like to lead into is, when it comes to the both of us being a woman in business, what advice do you have for other women potentially wanting to get into business in general, especially with your, I guess, law background, but just being a woman in business? You spoke about your daughter and the path that potentially she might take. What advice do you have for women in business?
Well, I can tell you this. I went and worked for some men that were running a small firm, and I know them, and I realised they were no smarter than I was, and that was really reassuring. This is not an insult to them, but it was just really reassuring that they didn't have something very different to what I had in terms of the skill set. So that actually gave me a huge boost in my own confidence to think, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. So it's really important. But if I hadn't gone out on a limb and had that experience, where I was still answering questions for them, where I realised, but they're out there doing this and they've done it for so long. How have they done it if they didn't know all those answers? And I realised, running a business isn't about knowing all the answers. No. It's actually about backing yourself enough to go, I'll get there, I'll figure out what the answers are.
Exactly.
I just need to start.
I'll find.
Exactly. Absolutely. So what it is about a level of self-confidence that says, I don't have everything, I don't know everything, but I am willing to find out, and I am willing to take a level of risk in yourself, in the world at large, that they will also engage you. So I do think that comes with time. Like the young version of me might not have had the same appetite for that level of risk as the older version of me that thought, well, I can do it too. And I do think you have to measure things. You have to be like, well, I started out, you build a level of maybe savings, or you have a plan B or something like that.
Yeah.
You think about this in terms of resources, but sometimes people don't. True. I mean, a lot of people have gone out, left uni and started big businesses from the garage of their parents' home and been raving successes.
Perfect examples out there, yep.
Yeah. So I think, but I guess for me, because I'd come from a background of people that had always just been in a profession of some sort, they weren't all naturally business people. So the journey should involve, for women, you just figuring out what it is that you're going to do, what it is that you think you can do, and doing lots of research, being very curious. But there are secret ingredients, and that involves having self-belief and taking a level of risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about saying that about women and doing your research and getting out there anyway, because why not? What about the men? Do you have any advice when it comes to men and working with women and how we can potentially join forces and work better together?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am where I am today because I had a lot of male mentors. In the law, particularly over the course of many years, there's been a lot more men in the law than there have been women. That demographic has actually recently changed, where there's actually now more women than men. But historically, there was always more men. And those men that are much further along their career than I am have always mentored me. So I'm very grateful because you could never know everything in the law. It's just one of those never-ending things in terms of acquiring knowledge. So it's such a relief to be able to call on my mentors, professional mentors, and say, hey, what do you think? And how should I measure this? And what do you think of this? And how would I draft this? And what would you do in this situation? So the role men can play. But then separate to that is, like anything. I mean, you've got equal counterparts. You could join forces in terms of businesses, referral partnerships. There's lots of different ways that men and women are now collaborating.
And that's exactly right. Work together. We each have our own power, our own strengths. So let's utilize them for the right reasons.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of my clients are men, and I love protecting their business. That is such a joy for me because on a personal level, I just want all my clients to win. And winning doesn't mean I go to court and win. It means resolving your complaint as quick as possible in the best way possible that protects your interests.
And the right outcome.
Right. So, but that's what business is. Business is about, okay, well, if this is going to happen here, let's do this here, and let's get to the most practical outcome. And that's what we all are doing in business. How do we practically deal with X, Y, Z and move on to get back to business, Yeah,
exactly. And when it comes to back to business, what about career regrets? Do you have any regrets? Was there something that maybe might have changed your path?
I think that's a difficult question to answer because you just don't know what you don't know in terms of where that one decision could have led you. So it's really hard to reconstruct your current reality as to if I'd done this, would this be different? I guess for me, it goes back to basic principles as to what makes me happy and successful in life, which is to have a loving partner, healthy children, a roof over my head, and being able to enjoy life. So for me, I'm like, do I still have those elements in life? And for me, because I do, I'm like, well, there's nothing really I should have to regret because I'm where I want to be in life.
100%. And what about, so the podcast promotes a seek no permission granted. What's your perspective on that, I guess, in life, raising a young family, as well as in business, and in particular in law and the law community?
Well, I can tell you this, that my observation of women, and that might be because I'm very close to my dad, and so maybe this is because I've spent so much time with my dad, that I observe that women are very apologetic all the time. And I am so far from that I always find it very interesting when women constantly apologize to me. And I'm like, I don't know why you're apologizing for everything all the time. It's almost like some women apologize for existing. Sometimes they apologize for having an opinion. Sometimes they apologize for being successful. Sometimes, and because I wasn't raised in that environment where anyone was apologizing for anything. So I really just didn't really understand. And I still find it difficult. So when women do that.
It's baffling. Why? Why are you apologizing?
Yeah.
Is it the way that, like you said, it's maybe the way you were raised? Is it the way they were raised, where they grew up in a household where they were sorry for everything?
Yeah, well, I'm always course correcting them, saying, I'm not sure why you're sorry. I don't know why. Like, as in, because I'm baffled by it. I'm like, you can have that opinion, you know. You don't need to apologize for it.
And I think it's very empowering for women to be unapologetically who they are. It doesn't matter your likes, your dislikes, the way you choose to raise your family, the career that you have. Own it, be you, and just go forward and thrive with confidence.
But the thing is, I think there is a level, and I mean, to some extent, we are social beings that need a level of social acceptance. But I do think outside of some level of social acceptance, there is a way in which women seem to be trying to please everyone. Yeah. And I do think that, maybe to my detriment, but I am not trying to please everyone. I'm trying to constantly make decisions that I'm comfortable with, that I can live with myself. And that is my standard. And that's, I think, differential for everyone. For me, it's like, can I live with myself if I make this decision? Because I don't care if blah, blah, blah over here or blah, blah, blah over there. Yeah. You know, we come from very tight-knit communities. So sometimes you would think about our church community, our community at the mosque, depending on what so sometimes you're thinking about your cousins, your sister, but for me, I've always lived this life, which is still problematic to the extent that could be seen as too individualistic. But I do think there needs to be a level of being very connected to your community, but at the same time, being able to stand on your own 2 feet and make decisions that are in your best interests without, but still being connected.
Without needing to apologise for
Without needing to apologise, but still being aware of and having love for your community. And I do want to speak to that because, as I was saying, one of the reasons when Che reached out to me, I was so happy to get that message, is because we are at a time where sometimes we need to re-examine what it is to be an Arab Australian. And I'm so proud to be an Arab Australian. And I was just saying to you earlier, you know, we don't get enough credit for our own ethnic communities and how warm and loving and kind and generous we are as a community. You know, a lot of my community will give you the shirt off their back. That's the kind of peoples they are. And I just don't think we get enough credit for that. There's a way in which the media is constantly portraying Arabs as deficit and associated with really horrible, horrible things. And that's not my community. And just, you know, whether it's, you know, there's a way in which men are being portrayed that is so far from my example of my father, who's such a loving, generous, selfless man, who I find is so prideful. He still finds it difficult to just come to dinner with me because I'm going to pay, for example. No, I've got to pay for you, Sarah. I'm like, don't be ridiculous, Dad. Just, you know, I'm paying, I'm taking you to dinner, or just sit at dinner with us, or he's just always wanting to be the giver. And I always think, and he's always he picks up the kids from me and he'll come and help clean the kitchen. There's nothing my dad wouldn't do for me or the family. And I think, where's the portrayal of Arab men like that, that are so kind and loving? And there's not enough of that. And
absolutely. And me as an Australian, especially being new to Sydney and the whole beautiful big wide world and the multiculturalism that is Sydney, and working in a space with the Trademark Group, a company where we're very heavily invested in the Arab community and here at Oz Arab Media, that's actually what I found. I've found them to be all love. I've found them to be kind and generous, very loyal, loving, family-orientated, giving people. I still struggle to see the other side that's out there.
Yeah. And I do think over the course of time, I hope that our actual narratives, our individual, our collective narratives, which are layered, but, you know, the more stories we tell of who we are, I hope that is what prevails at a time when we feel like there's so much not only negative portrayals, but there's a lot of destruction of culture and heritage that's happening in this moment. So preservation is the obvious next response to that, preserving who we are, our culture, our heritage, our ways of existing, and not losing all of that generosity, kindness and love as to who we are as a collective.
Yeah, I think that also goes back into her empire here and exactly what we embody. It's about seeking no permission, being unapologetically all of who you are.
Yes. I mean, look, that's exactly what earlier I've said that, I've always tried to encourage people to be really bold and back themselves. And what's the worst that can happen if you take big risks?
Exactly. Okay, you fail, but it's not a failure. It's a lesson. Get up and start again. Move on.
I mean, we're just really privileged. I mean, in
Yes, we
Australia, what's the worst possible scenario that can possibly happen to you? And I kind of think, and because I'm very pragmatic like this, I sometimes play out the worst case scenario in my mind. And I'm like, I could still survive that. So then I go backwards and go, it's fine. Everything's going to be fine because
I'm going to do it.
whatever the worst case scenario is, I would still be able to move on from that worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of this stuff is like, not to be too dramatic, but like you're not going to die by taking big risks most of the time. I'm not talking about physical risks, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the risk in relation to perception. We're talking about financial risks. And so
judgment, like let go of the judgment, let go of the perception. Other people's perception is something that you cannot control. That's not within your realm.
And it's kind of like a trap because where does it end?
Exactly.
Like who are you worried about? Whose eyes and where does it end? So, this should be, no permission is just a call to liberation and being yourself, fully yourself, and really embracing that and being confident in that.
Absolutely. Sarah, I could literally sit here and talk to you all day. Thank you so much for joining us here at Her Empire, and I look forward to getting to know you some more.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.